That night, the chandeliers glimmered like stars frozen in crystal, casting their glow across gowns and tuxedos worth more than some people's yearly salaries. The gala was supposed to be the highlight of our year, my husband's biggest business event, a celebration of his rising status, a night where I was meant to stand by his side, proud and radiant. I had spent weeks planning for it. Every detail mattered: my hair, my jewelry, my dress. Oh, that dress. It wasn't just fabric. It was hours of thought, countless fittings, a choice that was supposed to reflect me. Something elegant, something timeless, something that whispered, "She belongs by his side." When I arrived, I expected his smile. I expected the little spark in his eyes when he looked at me, the way he used to when we were younger. Instead, I froze, because across the ballroom, standing under the golden light, was Jenny, and she was wearing my dress. Not just a similar one, not a copy, mine. The exact gown I had bought, chosen, altered to fit me. Every stitch was familiar. I knew because I had held it against my own body in the mirror, smiling at the reflection, imagining this night. But Jenny was wearing it like it belonged to her. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she had unknowingly bought the same one. But when I turned to my husband, searching his face for explanation, I didn't find shock or confusion. I found indifference. "Oh," he said, almost casually, as though he were mentioning the weather. "Jenny needed a dress for tonight. Yours suited her better. You don't mind, do you?" I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, waiting for some sign that he was joking, that he understood what he had done. But instead, he leaned closer, his voice low and cool. "Be generous. Don't make a fuss." Double quotes generous. As though what was mine was his to give away. As though I should be flattered that Jenny was parading around in something meant for me. As though my feelings, my dignity were trivial compared to her convenience. In that moment, my world didn't shatter loudly. There were no screams, no broken glass, no dramatic confrontation, just silence. Inside, I felt something crack, not a wild break, but a quiet one. The kind of break that doesn't heal the same way. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't ask him why he thought Jenny's needs were greater than mine. Instead, I smiled faintly, excused myself, and walked out. And no one noticed. Not the glittering crowd, not the orchestra, not even him. He stayed, laughing, clinking glasses. Jenny, glowing in the spotlight that should have been mine. And I, his wife, slipped out into the night, the chill air biting my skin harder than his words ever could. I left without a word, and that silence would change everything. The night air outside the gala was sharp, biting against my skin, but I didn't shiver. The cold was nothing compared to the chill I felt inside my chest. I walked slowly, heels clicking against the pavement, each step echoing in the silence of my own thoughts. I didn't cry, not yet. The tears would come later, but at that moment, there was only emptiness. How did we even get here? I remember when he used to look at me like I was the only person in the room, when his laughter felt like sunshine, and every promise he whispered into my hair felt unshakable. We were young then, struggling, dreaming. I believed in him so completely that I never questioned the sacrifices. His late nights at the office, the missed dinners, the endless business trips. I told myself it was all temporary, that he was building something for us, for our future. I stood by him when no one else believed he could make it. I watched him fall, fail, and rise again. I stitched together his torn pride with encouragement, fueled his dreams with my own patience, and when he succeeded, I told myself it was our victory. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being ours. It became his. His success, his spotlight, his choices, and then there was Jenny, always there, like a shadow. At first, I didn't mind. She was his friend, his colleague. I convinced myself she was harmless. After all, what threat could she be to the bond we had? But little things began to gnaw at me. The way she laughed too brightly at his jokes. The way he always took her calls, even at dinner. The way she seemed to know details about his life that I hadn't heard yet. And every time I tried to bring it up, he brushed it off. Don't be insecure. You're imagining things. Jenny is just a friend. So I swallowed my doubts. Again and again. I thought love meant trust. I thought loyalty meant silence. But tonight, when he handed Jenny my dress and told me to be generous, that wasn't imagination. That wasn't insecurity. That was betrayal, wrapped in silk and sequins, paraded under crystal chandeliers for everyone to admire. And the cruelest part, he didn't even think it was wrong. My cab ride home was a blur. I stared out the window, watching the city lights streak by, each one reminding me of the life we built here. The apartment we chose together. The restaurants we once loved. The park bench where he first told me he loved me. Memories layered over reality, and I wondered, was I holding onto a ghost? Was the man I loved still there, hidden beneath his ambition and pride, or had he disappeared long ago? When I stepped into our apartment, it felt colder than the night outside. The walls, once filled with laughter, felt silent. My reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger, painted lips, jeweled earrings, hair pinned in a perfect bun. I looked every bit the wife of a successful man, and yet I had never felt more invisible. I sat down, pulled open my journal and let the pen bleed across the page. If love means giving until there's nothing left of me, then maybe what I've been holding onto isn't love at all. The words blurred as my hand trembled. I closed the journal softly, as if it could hear the pounding of my heart. For the first time in years, I wondered what would happen if I stopped fighting for him. The morning after the gala, the world looked the same. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, the coffee machine hissed in the kitchen, and my husband hummed while scrolling through his phone. As if nothing had happened. As if I hadn't walked out of the most important event of his year. As if Jenny hadn't been draped in my dress like a crown jewel. As if I hadn't shattered silently inside. He didn't ask me why I left early. He didn't even mention it. Instead, he said, almost casually, the gala was a success. Investors were impressed. Jenny handled herself well. Jenny. Again. Always Jenny. I sat across the table, staring at the coffee in my cup. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to claw through the wall of arrogance he had built around himself. But instead, I stayed quiet. Silence tasted bitter at first, like swallowing glass. But slowly, it began to feel like strength. He thrived on my reactions, on convincing me that my emotions were unreasonable, that I was overreacting, dramatic, insecure. But silence left him with nothing to twist, nothing to dismiss. So I said, nothing. I nodded. I smiled faintly. I moved through the days like a shadow in my own home, and he didn't notice. Or maybe he noticed, but didn't care. When I cooked dinner, he scrolled on his phone. When I asked how his day was, his answers were short. When Jenny called, his tone softened. his voice warmer than it had been with me in months. A teen night, I turned my back to him in bed, my eyes wide open in the dark, wondering how love could turn into this. The silence between us grew not loud, not violent, but suffocating. He seemed comfortable in it, as though my absence, even in presence, was convenient. I didn't nag. I didn't argue. I didn't demand. But inside me, something was shifting. I began writing more in my journal, filling page after page with words I couldn't speak aloud. I poured my heartbreak into ink, and with each sentence, I began to see myself clearer. If my worth is measured by how much of myself I can give away, then I have been bankrupt for years. It wasn't an overnight revelation. It was slow, painful, like peeling off a mask I had worn too long. But for the first time, I wondered, what if silence wasn't just my shield? What if it could be my exit? The thought scared me, because leaving him wasn't just leaving a man. It was leaving the life I had built around him. The years of sacrifice, the shared dreams, the identity I had wrapped around us. But what was left of us? A marriage where Jenny wore my dress. A husband who told me to be generous. A silence where my love used to live. The crack in my heart was widening, and I knew it was only a matter of time before it split entirely. I didn't know when. I didn't know how. But deep down, I knew I wouldn't stay forever. Jenny's presence in our lives didn't fade after the gala. If anything, it grew bolder. Her name slipped into conversations like an uninvited guest who refused to leave. She's brilliant at handling clients. Jenny thinks we should expand into that market. Jenny suggested a new approach. Jenny. It was as if my husband couldn't breathe without mentioning her, as if his sentences were incomplete without her name and me. I listened. I nodded. I kept quiet. First, I thought maybe if I ignored it, she would fade into the background, that my silence would make her insignificant. But the opposite happened. She started showing up more often. At dinners, at business meetings that somehow bled into personal time. At casual get-togethers where I used to sit proudly by his side, now sitting across from me, smiling sweetly like she belonged. Once, I caught her wearing a necklace I had seen in my husband's drawer weeks before, something I had assumed he bought for me. When I asked him about it, he shrugged. She liked it. It suited her better. Suits her better. Those words rang in my ears like a curse. When I dared to push back, to question why Jenny had become such a permanent fixture in our lives, his expression hardened. "You're being ridiculous," he said flatly. "Jenny has been nothing but supportive of me. You should appreciate her instead of resenting her." Appreciate her? I was supposed to appreciate the woman who had slipped into the spaces I once filled. The woman who wore my dress, my necklace, my husband's attention like they belonged to her. I stared at him that night, searching for the man. I married the man who once swore no one could ever take my place. But all I saw was a stranger, and strangely, I didn't feel angry anymore. The rage I once expected to feel was gone. In its place was something colder, steadier, detachment. I began to notice things I hadn't before. The way his laugh no longer made me smile. The way his touch felt unfamiliar. The way his promises sounded rehearsed. One evening, as he droned on about a new project, I realized I had stopped listening. My mind had drifted elsewhere, toward the book I wanted to read, the coffee shop down the street I wanted to visit, the art class I had seen advertised but never dared to join. I was slipping away from him, quietly, like sand through his fingers. And he didn't even notice. Jenny's presence no longer pierced me like it once did. Instead, it became a mirror showing me just how absent I had become in my own marriage, because the truth was, I wasn't competing with Jenny. I was competing with a version of him that no longer existed. And I was tired, daughters. Oh, I let him talk. I let him praise her. I let him live in the illusion that she was the missing piece of his world. Meanwhile, I began piecing together my own small things at first. Long walks alone, quiet mornings with my journal, rediscovering the things I once loved before I became his wife. With each passing day, the bond between us thinned, unraveling thread by thread. And still he didn't see it. He didn't see me. Not anymore. The night of the charity dinner should have been simple, elegant. A chance to give back, to smile for cameras, to play the role of the supportive wife once more. I had almost convinced myself that it would pass quietly, that maybe this time I could move through it without Jenny overshadowing me, but I should have known better. She was already there when we arrived, seated at our table, her laughter chiming like silver bells as though she belonged. My husband's face lit up when he saw her, that rare, genuine smile I hadn't seen directed at me in so long. For a moment, I felt invisible. The dinner dragged on, each course tasting like ash in my mouth. I barely touched my food, watching as Jenny leaned closer to him, whispering jokes, her hand brushing his arm like it was the most natural thing in the world. But the true wound came later. I guessed an older woman I admired turned to me with a polite smile and asked, "So, how do you feel about Jenny's involvement in your husband's work? She seems to have such influence." The question stung, but I forced a smile. "It's certainly noticeable." It was meant as a light remark, an attempt to veil the truth. But before I could say more, my husband cut in sharply. "Noticeable? Don't belittle her." His tone was cold, his gaze sharper than I had expected. "Jenny has been invaluable to me, maybe more than anyone else. She deserves respect, not sarcasm." The table went silent. My cheeks burned as all eyes turned toward me. Humiliation clawed at my throat, choking me. I hadn't mocked Jenny. I hadn't even raised my voice. But in front of everyone, he chose to defend her against me. Jenny looked down at her plate, feigning modesty, but I saw the flicker of triumph in her eyes. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to scream, to shout, to tell everyone at that table who I was, what I had sacrificed, how I had built the very foundation he stood on. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled faintly, the same smile I wore at the gala, the same smile I had learned to master when silence was the only dignity I had left. I said nothing, and in that silence, I felt something final settle inside me. It wasn't rage. It wasn't heartbreak. It was release. The realization that I had nothing left to prove. That fighting for him, for his attention, for my place in his life, had become an endless war with no victory. When the dinner ended, I excused myself early. He barely noticed. He stayed behind, laughing with Jenny, the glow of admiration still lingering in his eyes. I walked out into the night air once again, heels clicking softly on the pavement, my reflection catching briefly in the darkened glass of the restaurant. For the first time, I saw myself clearly, not as his wife, not as Jenny's shadow, but as a woman standing at the edge of a decision that would change everything. I knew then, with quiet certainty, I wouldn't keep playing this role much longer. The breaking point had come, and soon I would break away. The decision came quietly, Not in the heat of an argument, not in the aftermath of another betrayal, but in the stillness of an ordinary night. He was asleep beside me, his breathing steady, the faint glow of his phone still flickering on the nightstand. Jenny's name the last thing he looked at before closing his eyes. I stared at the ceiling for hours, listening to the silence between us, realizing it had become the loudest part of our marriage. And then I rose, not with anger, not with chaos, but with a calmness that startled me. I pulled out a small suitcase from the closet, the same one I had once used for our weekend getaways. I filled it slowly. A few dresses, comfortable shoes, my journal, a photograph of my parents, the necklace I had bought for myself years ago when I still believed in small joys. Each item I placed inside wasn't just clothing or objects. They were pieces of me, pieces I was reclaiming. I didn't take everything, not because I couldn't, but because I didn't need to. I was no longer leaving to escape, I was leaving to begin. As I zipped the suitcase, I paused. My eyes lingered on him, sleeping so peacefully, unaware that his world was about to change. For a fleeting second, I wondered if he would care, if he would notice the emptiness beside him in the morning, if Jenny's presence would be enough to fill the silence I left behind. But then I reminded myself his care, his notice, his choices. None of it mattered anymore. I slipped off my wedding ring and placed it gently on the nightstand, right beside his phone. A silent goodbye. A symbol of everything I had given, everything I had lost. Then I walked to the door. Every step felt heavier and lighter at the same time. My chest ached, but my shoulders loosened. My heart cracked, but my soul breathed for the first time in years. When I closed the door behind me, there was no dramatic slam, no noise to wake him. Only silence, the same silence he had ignored for so long, and that silence would be the only message he needed. I left without a word, and this time, I wasn't just leaving a gala. I was leaving him. I always thought that pain reached a limit, that once you were broken, you couldn't break any further. But life had a cruel way of proving me wrong. The week after the gala, I became invisible to Daniel. He was polite enough, but he barely acknowledged me in the house. He came home late, sometimes smelling faintly of Jenny's perfume. He always claimed it was from work. I didn't argue anymore. I simply watched, listened, and stayed silent. But while he was slipping further into her world, I was slowly building my own. One morning, after he left for work, I spread the sketches I had made over the dining table. My designs were different now, bolder, unapologetic, no longer catering to his expectations. Each one was a piece of my heart stitched into fabric. I called an old contact, a woman named Clara, who ran an independent boutique downtown. Years ago, she'd admired my work, but Daniel had discouraged me from collaborating with her. It's too small scale, he had said, not worth your time. This time, I didn't ask him. Claire's voice sparkled with excitement over the phone. Darling, I've been waiting years for this call. Bring your sketches tomorrow. Let's talk. For the first time in a long time, I felt a surge of hope. But fate wasn't done testing me yet. That evening, Daniel came home earlier than usual. His tie was loosened, his expression stormy. He walked into the living room and saw my sketches scattered across the table. His eyes narrowed. What's this? He asked flatly. My designs, I answered, my voice calm. He picked up one sketch and examined it, his jaw tightening. You're doing this again? After everything? Don't you think it's a little reckless? You know how much pressure I am under right now, and instead of supporting me, you're what? Chasing vanity projects. My chest ached, but I refused to back down. It's not vanity, Danielle. It's my passion. My work. You knew who I was before you married me. Why is it so hard for you to accept that I want something of my own? His voice rose, sharp and clipped. Because, Elise, you're supposed to be by my side, not running off to play designer when I need you most. You're being selfish, selfish. That word stuck more than it should have. I looked at him, really looked. The man who once celebrated my talent was gone. In his place stood someone who measured my worth by how much I supported him, how much I gave up for him. I gathered my sketches into a neat pile and met his gaze. If following my dreams makes me selfish, then maybe I've been selfless for far too long. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Daniel's expression flickered, something unreadable passed through his eyes, but then it was gone. He dropped the sketch onto the table and walked away, muttering, "Do whatever you want." His footsteps faded upstairs, leaving me trembling, but strangely steady inside. That night, I sat awake in the dim glow of my desk lamp, reworking the details of my designs. For once, I didn't care if he approved. The next day, I took my portfolio to Claire. Her boutique was small but vibrant, filled with unique pieces that spoke of stories untold. She flipped through my designs slowly, her face unreadable. Then she looked up at me and smiled. "Elise, these are breathtaking. Raw, honest. They deserve to be seen. I'll showcase them at the autumn fashion show. It's not huge, but the right people will be there." I nearly cried. This was the chance I'd been waiting for, but just when I thought I had reclaimed a piece of myself, life twisted the knife, because that same evening, Daniel came home with Jenny, not as a casual guest, not as a passing friend, but as someone who walked into my home with confidence, carrying a bottle of wine, her laughter echoing through the walls as if she belonged there. And Daniel, he didn't stop her. He didn't even look at me when he said, "Jenny's joining us for dinner tonight." My heart froze. My hands clenched in two fists at my sides. Jenny's eyes sparkled with triumph when she glanced at me, and for the first time, I realized something terrifying. She wasn't just trying to steal my dress, my spotlight, or even my husband's attention. She was trying to steal my life. When I woke up the next morning, the city was painted in shades of soft gray, as if the world was trying to keep my emotions muted, calm and contained. Yet my heart raced uncontrollably, betraying the stillness of the dawn. I sat at the window of my apartment, a steaming cup of coffee cradled in my hands, staring out at the faint drizzle of rain. The day after the gala had already turned my life upside down. Richard's betrayal wasn't just a fleeting moment of carelessness. It had torn open old wounds I thought I had buried deep. And then there was Daniel. The way he had looked at me last night, as though he saw me, not the dress, not the circumstances, but me, had been both terrifying and comforting. It was the kind of gaze that made me feel both exposed and cherished, as if my flaws and my scars didn't diminish me but rather made me whole. I pressed my fingers to my temple. "Don't get ahead of yourself, Clara. Don't replace one mistake with another." But my phone buzzed, interrupting my self-scolding. It was a message from Daniel. "Good morning, Clara. I hope today feels lighter than last night. If you're free, let me take you out for some real coffee, not the cheap kind served at galas." I couldn't help but laugh softly. Who makes fun of gala coffee while trying to comfort someone? Daniel, apparently. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure of what to say. A voice inside me warned me not to rush, not to lean on someone so quickly, especially when my emotions were still raw. But another voice whispered, why not? Why not allow someone to treat you kindly for once? Finally, I typed, morning, coffee. Sounds good. Where? His reply came almost instantly. My favorite little CAF on 5th Street. Noon? I agreed, and immediately my stomach flipped with both nerves and anticipation. By the time I arrived at the CAF, I had changed outfits twice, fixed my hair 3 times, and reminded myself at least a dozen times that this is not a date. Clara. It's coffee. But when I walked in and spotted Daniel already waiting, that small, easy smile tugging at his lips, I realized I wasn't fooling myself at all. The CAF was quaint and cozy, with shelves lined with books and potted plants dangling from wooden beams. A soft hum of chatter filled the air, along with the comforting aroma of freshly ground beans. You look like you almost didn't come, Daniel teased as I slid into the seat across from him. I almost didn't, I admitted, my honesty surprising even myself. And yet, here you are, he said, eyes twinkling with something unspoken. We ordered coffee, and soon enough, conversation flowed like a gentle river. Daniel didn't pry about Richard or Jenny, though the shadow of last night lingered between us. Instead, he asked about my dreams, my career, my favorite books. I found myself laughing at his dry humor, blushing when his gaze lingered a little too long, and realizing, with growing shock, how easy it felt to sit there with him. But just as I was starting to relax, my phone buzzed again. I glanced down, and my heart sank. It was a message from Richard. Clara, we need to talk. Please. It wasn't what it looked like. I stared at the screen, anger bubbling inside me. Not what it looked like. He literally handed my dress to another woman. What more explanation did I need? Daniel noticed my change in expression. Bad news? He asked gently. I hesitated, then turned the phone face down on the table. Just Richard. Trying to justify the unjustifiable, Daniel's jaw tightened, but he nodded, respecting my choice not to delve deeper. You don't owe him your time right now. Let him wait. The firmness in his tone startled me, but it also gave me strength. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't carrying my burdens alone. The rain had stopped by the time we left the CAF, the sun peeking out from behind thick clouds. Daniel walked me home, his umbrella tilted just enough to cover both of us, and as we paused in front of my building, I realized something. Richard had humiliated me in front of the world. Jenny had smiled at my expense, and the gala had been a nightmare I'd never forget. But somehow, through that storm, I had stumbled upon something unexpected, someone who saw me in a way I hadn't been seen in a long time. It wasn't love yet. Not even close. But it was the spark of something new. And for the first time in a long while, that was enough. I thought by now my heart would be used to the weight of betrayal. But pain has a way of sneaking in even when you least expect it. When I saw Ethan at that same gala venue again, weeks after I had walked out in silence, I knew fate had brought me back for a reason. This time, though, I wasn't in the shadows. I wore a dress that wasn't about making a statement for anyone else, it was for me. Midnight blue, flowing but powerful, stitched with the quiet strength of a woman who had survived heartbreak and chosen herself. I didn't go there for him. I went because the event was for one of the charities my company had partnered with, and I wasn't going to let the ghost of Ethan and Jenny rob me of spaces I deserved to stand in. Still, My pulse quickened the moment I saw them. Ethan in his sharp black tuxedo, Jenny glowing in a pale silver gown. She looked radiant, yes, but when her eyes landed on me, that smile flickered, and then Ethan turned. For a moment he froze. I could see his jaw tighten, his eyes scan me as though he wasn't sure if I was real. But I didn't flinch. I didn't shrink away, like the last time. Instead, I lifted a glass of champagne from a passing tray, sipped slowly and smiled at the group I was talking to. That was the first twist of the knife for him. Realizing I didn't need him to be noticed. When our eyes met across the room, there was no hatred in mine. No desperation. Only indifference. And that, I think, broke him more than my silence ever could. As the night went on, people whispered. I could feel their glances shifting between Jenny and me. Not because of drama, but because suddenly, without trying, I was the one radiating presence. Jenny noticed. She leaned closer to Ethan, her hand clutching his arm like a claim. But I didn't even look their way. I laughed with my colleagues, toasted to achievements and smiled genuinely. And then, when the speeches started, my name was called. I hadn't expected it. But the organizers wanted to acknowledge my company's support. I walked to the stage, my heels clicking softly, and accepted the bouquet and microphone. My voice was steady. Tonight isn't just about celebration. It's about generosity, kindness, and remembering that true value isn't in what you wear or who you impress, it's in how you choose to treat people. Always remember, you don't need to dim your light for anyone else to shine. The applause was thunderous, and in the middle of that applause, I caught Ethan staring at me, his face pale, his hand slipping from Jenny's as though reality had just struck him. That was when I realized something. I didn't need revenge. My happiness, my growth, my refusal to be broken, that was enough to unravel him. Jenny, however, wasn't clapping. Her eyes narrowed, her lips pursed. I could almost hear the thoughts racing in her mind, because for her, it wasn't enough to have Ethan. She needed to have one. But watching me stand there glowing in a way no borrowed dress could ever create, she realized she hadn't won anything. When I stepped down, the whispers grew louder. People were already drawing comparisons, already questioning Ethan's choices, and I simply smiled, handed my flowers to a little girl near the stage, and walked back to my table. Ethan tried to approach me later that night. His eyes carried a storm of regret, confusion, maybe even longing. But before he could take a single step closer, I turned away, laughing with someone new, someone who looked at me like I was the only person in the room. It wasn't about love, not yet. But it was about freedom, and Ethan realized, far too late, that by giving Jenny my dress that night, he hadn't just insulted me, he had handed me the reason to walk away, to rise higher, to find a version of myself that no one could take from me. And for a man like him, watching me rise was the cruelest punishment of all. The next morning, the city felt quieter than usual, as if it too had paused to watch the fallout of the gala. I woke early, sunlight spilling across my bedroom, and for the first time in weeks I felt calm. No alarms, no expectations, no strings attached to anyone else's approval. My phone buzzed, but I didn't rush to it. I knew who it was before I looked. Ethan. Clara, we need to talk. Please. It's important. I stared at the message and typed slowly. We already talked. Last night said everything I need to hear. I hit send and set the phone down, but fate, of course, isn't so easily dismissed. That afternoon, my assistant buzzed through the intercom. Ethan was downstairs, insisting on speaking to me. I paused. My first instinct was to ignore him. My second instinct, curiosity, won. I walked into the lobby, and there he was, suit slightly rumpled, hair tousled in a way that used to make my heart flutter. But not today. Today, I was done fluttering. Clara, his voice wavered slightly. Please, just listen. I listen, I interrupted, voice steady. Ethan, I've been listening for years. Listening to excuses, to promises, to lies. I don't need to listen anymore. I need to see. And what I see isn't love. It's selfishness. His face paled, but he pressed on. Jenny, she isn't who you think she is. She's been manipulating me and I realized it too late. I laughed softly, bitterly. Manipulating you? Ethan, she wore my dress in front of everyone and you didn't even hesitate. You defended her. You humiliated me. And now you call it manipulation. His hands shook. Yes, but I see it now. I see that I made a mistake. You were always the one. Always. The words should have hurt, but they didn't. Not anymore, because by now, I had already moved. I don't need your apologies. I don't need your explanations. I've spent years putting myself last for someone who didn't deserve it. I'm done, he swallowed, lips trembling. Clara, please, I can fix this. I can. No, I stepped back. I held my head high. The strength I had reclaimed in these weeks radiated from me, silent but impossible to ignore. And then the twist came. Jenny herself appeared, stepping into the lobby with a forced smile, unaware that her carefully constructed world was unraveling. You're overreacting, Clara, she said, her voice icy but faltering. Ethan didn't mean I cut her off. Overreacting? Really? You think stealing someone else's life, flaunting their place and charming a man isn't serious? Ethan flinched, realizing for the first time that Jenny's polished exterior was a mask. The confidence he had admired wasn't strength, it was deception. Jenny's eyes flicked nervously toward him. Ethan, enough, he snapped, finally seeing her the way I had all along. I was blind. I trusted you. I was wrong. Clara, his gaze softened, but I didn't meet it. Not this time. I turned and walked away, my heels clicking on the floor with purpose. Every step echoed the years I had spent finding my voice, my independence, my worth. Jenny and Ethan called after me, but their words couldn't reach me. They were irrelevant now, because I wasn't just leaving a dress, a gala, or a toxic relationship behind. I was leaving a chapter of my life that no longer served me. And as I stepped out into the sunlight, I realized the final, liberating truth. Some doors aren't meant to be closed, they're meant to open the way to who you were always meant to become. The days after the confrontation felt surreal. Ethan and Jenny faded from my life as quickly as they had stormed in. Their calls went unanswered, their messages ignored. And for the first time in years, I felt the weight of peace settle over me like a warm blanket. I threw myself into my work. Claire's boutique had become a sanctuary, a place where I could pour my heart and soul into my designs without interference, without judgment, without compromise. Every stitch, every sketch, every creation became a testament to my resilience. The fashion show was approaching, and excitement replaced the lingering pain I had carried for so long. I worked tirelessly, often late into the night, but it no longer felt exhausting, it felt invigorating. Each success was a personal victory, and each compliment from the crowd was a gentle reminder of my worth. Then there was him, Liam. I met him at the boutique during a quiet afternoon, just before the big show. He was browsing, casually inspecting the racks, but when our eyes met, there was an unspoken recognition, something deep, simple, and honest. He was nothing like Ethan. No arrogance, no manipulation, no shadow of someone else's approval lurking behind his smile. Just genuine warmth, a spark of curiosity, and eyes that made you feel like the only person in the room. Your work, he said softly, holding up one of my dresses. It's incredible, bold, unique. You clearly put yourself into every stitch. I smiled, a little self-conscious, but proud. Thank you. That means a lot. We started talking, first about the designs, then about life, dreams, and the things that had shaped us. It was easy, comfortable, unexpectedly safe. I didn't realize how much I had craved that until the conversation stretched into hours, into laughter, into shared silences that weren't awkward but soothing. When the fashion show night arrived, my designs stole the spotlight. The audience clapped, cheered, and photographers captured every moment. But my eyes sought Liam in the crowd, and when our gaze met, it felt like the world had shrunk to just the two of us. After the show, he approached me again, handing me a glass of champagne. You've outdone yourself. Honestly, you inspire me. I laughed softly, a sound light and free. I guess I finally realized I was designing for me, not for anyone else. That's why it's brilliant, he said. You never need to dim your light for anyone. And now, look at you shining brighter than ever. For the first time, I didn't think about Ethan, Jenny, or the past that had weighed me down. I thought about possibilities, about a life where respect, kindness, and love weren't negotiable. And in that moment, Liam took my hand gently, not possessively, not demanding, just offering partnership. I looked into his eyes, and I realized that this connection, this warmth, this genuine interest was everything I had been missing. I smiled. A true smile, not forced, not defensive, but real. I think I could get used to this. He laughed, and the world felt lighter. Some doors close not to trap you, but to make way for the ones that will lead you home. And as the city lights shimmered outside the boutique, I knew one undeniable truth. I was finally free. I was finally myself. And I was ready for a future where love didn't demand my silence, my sacrifice, or my surrender, but celebrated every part of me. Months passed like a gentle tide, carrying away the remnants of a life that had once held me captive. Ethan faded completely from my world. I heard whispers, rumors that he and Jenny had drifted apart, that their carefully curated fad was crumbling, but it didn't matter. Their chaos was no longer mine to carry. Instead, my days were filled with color, creativity, and laughter that belonged only to me. My designs were being recognized beyond the boutique, clients requesting custom pieces, articles featuring my work in local magazines. Every success reminded me that I was capable of more than I had ever believed, and Liam, he became a constant presence. Not intrusive, not demanding, but supportive, present, and encouraging. He celebrated my victories, soothed my frustrations, and reminded me that love didn't need to consume or diminish me, it simply existed alongside my independence. One crisp morning, I stood at the balcony of my apartment, the city stretching out in front of me, bathed in golden sunlight. Liam handed me a cup of coffee, his hand brushing mine lightly. "You've come a long way," he said softly. I smiled, glancing at the sketches I had left scattered on the table from the night before. I had too. I lost myself for a long time. But now, I found her again. Me. He squeezed my hand. And I'm honored to be part of her story. For a moment, I thought about the gala, the dress, Jenny's smirk, Ethan's betrayal. I thought about the tears I had shed in silence, the nights I had walked away from a life that didn't serve me, and I realized something profound. Every step of that painful journey had led me here. Not to revenge, not to resentment, but to freedom, love, and self-respect. I breathed deeply, letting the wind carry away the last traces of fear and doubt. Life wasn't perfect. I still had struggles, still had uncertainties, but now they were mine to face on my own terms. When Liam leaned in, brushing a soft kiss to my forehead, I closed my eyes and smiled, because finally I knew the story wasn't about the dress, the betrayal, or the heartbreak. It was about me, about reclaiming my voice, about choosing myself, about stepping into a world where my happiness wasn't borrowed, it was earned. And as the city sparkled beneath the morning sun, I realized this was only the beginning. A beginning where love was kind, freedom was precious, and I was finally whole. Thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. If you watched till the end, please comment love. Before leaving, please hit the subscribe button, comment your thought, and share with your nearest and dearest one. See you in the next one. Until to the next one, spread love.